Listen to these numbers. 31% of pastors say they're struggling with emotional health. 26% say their relationships are suffering. And despite 55% saying they felt happy in their ministry in the last week, 41% told Barna Research Group that they felt sad and even exhausted. That's the state of those charged with shepherding the flock. These are your pastors, our pastors. They're the ones counseling young couples entering marriage, having their first child. They're the ones at our bedside when medicine and human healing have reached the limits of their powers. Today on State of Independence, where does a pastor go for help? How does a pastor guard against despair and loneliness turning into isolation, moral failure, and public scandal? That's our conversation on today's State of Independence. Stay with us. It's likely that most of you watching today have been cared for or been loved and encouraged by a servant leader, a pastor, someone chosen by your local church to lead and proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ and care for his flock. But if you Google church leaders, the stories you'll find are often about the failures of pastors and ministry leaders, sensational scandals, moral, ethical, financial failures. The watching world stops to gawk, friends often run, church members and donors leave. In the wreckage and confusion is the pastor, a spouse, children, a universe of people who suffer without an advocate, and in the fog, a clear step forward. But there's an organization that exists, a kind of rescue team for hurting leaders, many of them pastors. It's called Serving Leaders, and one of its leaders is with me now. But before I introduce him, watch this.
Over the years, I saw what happens when a pastor falls. And so I thought, who serves those who serve? Who is there for the people who are really giving their lives?
I set up an appointment with Dave, and I was hoping that he would be talking about some of the church things that I was going through, but instead he was trying to get to know me, and it was a very encouraging time. He helped me understand that, pastors experience very similar things and that I wasn't alone.
Am I nuts? Am I supposed to feel this way? He helped me figure some things out that were going on in my heart that helped me flourish as a pastor, helped me to make wise decisions, even helped me to get settled when I was ready to just call it quits.
Didn't realize that because of pushing myself for many hours, too many years, that I was in a burnout position. I knew something wasn't right. But I went to a counselor and he suggested I get somebody who could kind of walk with me for a period of time. And Dave was just getting started with Serving Leaders. Every month or so we get together. And then by God's grace, I was restored to a place of effective ministry instead of getting out of ministry altogether.
I get to see the backstory. And the backstory is that Dave just really cares about people. And he has somehow been able to surround himself with like-minded people. That's what's become so exciting about this ministry.
We exist to revive, restore, and resource ministry leaders and their families, enabling them to pursue health and excellence in their call to ministry.
Coming to a number of his seminars in the last couple of years has been really helpful to give me ideas of what kind of training we can offer. And we're even hoping to possibly bring Dave and some of his staff over to help us with some of our ministry opportunities.
Honestly, I truly believe this. That I don't know where our marriage would be if had God not brought Dave into our life. And just the way everything worked out, that we felt like we had a safe place to go and someone who really understood us.
Well, Serving Leaders impacted me personally because I had a major breakdown. I was preaching on a Sunday morning, and as I describe it, it was like a hole was opened up and I was dropped 100 feet down. Servant Leaders walked me through a very dark time, but even now that I've come through the other side, it's something that is a regular practice and part of my life.
Wouldn't it be good to have a place to do preventative work rather than doing triage? Serving Leaders offers care, resources, and counseling to vocational and lay ministry leaders. We strategically come alongside those who serve the body of Christ.
When I was a youth pastor, I know how badly I needed it. And so when I decided to go into counseling, I guess I had that background experience. I really wanted to provide people with the kind of help that I wasn't able to get. And so I'm driven by that. And Dave had the same mission.
So knowing that there is somebody in an organization there that really cares about not what you're doing or your ministry accomplishments, but cares about you and God's calling for you is a really positive thing.
And I think that's what Serving Leaders offers. I think it offers a place for people to tend to the needs of their own soul, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, caring for themselves in order to be able to bring that Christ-like presence to others.
I realized as he was ministering with me and helping me that he wasn't just a counselor who I could also call a friend, but he's actually a friend who offers some really good counsel.
Quite honestly, without serving leaders in my life, I'm not sure that I would be in the position that I'm at right now as a senior pastor in the church that I'm serving.
Wow, what a powerful introduction to the work of Serving Leaders Ministries and the hope for people who have voluntarily or perhaps involuntarily found themselves in the quicksand of trial and testing. I know many of you watching were probably just thinking about a leader who you'd love to connect with this extraordinary organization, someone who needs urgent help. Joe Bruni is the Chief Operating Officer of Serving Leaders Ministries. He's been a ministry leader himself, so he knows something about the pressures that accompany positions of public trust. Joe, welcome to State of Independence.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, it's just a blessing to have you here. Did you serve as a pastor at some time?
I did. After seminary, I pastored a church. I was associate pastor for youth and family at a church in Hockessin, Delaware, for about 4 years. And then I ended up on staff with Young Life, which is a youth mission organization that I worked just outside of Philadelphia, on the western side of Philadelphia.
Was it what you thought it was going to be? I mean, I know all these people like me, you go to seminary and you feel God's call in your life to enter the ministry, and then you finish seminary and you head out to that first church. Was it what you expected?
Not at all. There are lots of surprises when you enter the ministry, and one of those was just the reality of the pressure that you have on you. Yeah. The moment you enter, the expectations of the congregation.
Everybody's watching you, right?
Yep, everybody's watching. There's expectations for you, for your family, but also expectations of your performance, what they want to accomplish.
What do you think they expect? Do you think they expect you to be like the perfect Christian couple, the perfect Christian family, that your walk 24/7 is supposed to exemplify what Jesus talked about in the Bible? Is that what?
I think so. I mean, and we hope for that, right? And that's a good thing to hope for. But I think it takes pastors to a level of above human somehow. Like we're supposed to be able to perform and be perfect and have it all together at all times. Yeah.
Did anybody ever say anything mean to you while you were a pastor, or insult you? Or?
Only a few times. Yeah, but I think pastors not only face a lot of pressure that people put on themselves, they are also, as spiritual leaders, just taking on a lot of the trauma that other people face. They become kind of the place people go to just deal with a lot of the issues.
So you officiate a funeral, or you go to a hospital to pray for somebody who's dying, and you comfort the family.
Yep.
But then, do you need comforting? Or, how are you impacted by it? I mean, you have to be the rock of Gibraltar when you're loving that family and caring for them. But then, what about you?
Yeah. So there's a level of trauma that it gets experienced by a pastor just secondhand. So not only are they human, they're experiencing their own trials in life, but then all the people that come to them are bringing all the trials and trauma that they experience and laying it on their pastor.
Yeah.
And it's a lot.
Yeah.
And we'd like to be able to say the pastor should just, him and Jesus, be able to take care of all that, but pastors need help too.
Yeah. Well, so what was that? What caused you to get into this wonderful work that you're doing with serving leaders? I mean, were you moved to do this because you realized the burdens that pastors have? Yeah.
So in the 15 years or so of ministry that I was in, I experienced a lot of great joys of ministry. Was in a really great context, actually. I wouldn't say I was experienced a lot of major dysfunction, and yet even still, the pressures of ministry for the sake of our family, the amount of sacrifice, and time and your whole life that you pour into it. It's a lot. And what I experienced over the years was just the need for help. And sometimes that help can't come from within an organization. Because the moment you might announce that you're struggling with something within your own church or organization, maybe the moment they say, oh, maybe you shouldn't be doing the job you're doing.
Right.
So I think pastors, ministry leaders need help that comes from outside, a safe place for them to be able to really be honest and vulnerable about what they need and where they're at. And
so how do you educate church members? So pastors preach every Sunday this gospel of Jesus and tell people to love their neighbor like they love themselves. And then people have these expectations for pastors to be kind of a walking shepherd, a little Christ, so to speak. And they're only 24 hours in a day. In the cases of most ministers, you have a family, you have a spouse, you have children. You have a spouse, kids?
I do. I have a wife and 5 daughters.
Wow, 5.
Yes.
Wow, you're a better man than me. Better man than me.
No, it's wonderful. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. But yeah,
and they need time, right? They need you also. So here's the challenge: your daughter is having a game, and you plan to show up to the game, but then somebody from the church has an issue and needs you to come right away.
Yeah.
What do you do?
That's a great question, and what I come to is a question of calling. What is the pastor's calling? And I think as a church member, we look at the pastor and say, your first calling is this church and me. You should be taking care of me. It's really easy to slip into that and not see the pastor as a person who has his own family and life and calling, just like the rest of us do. And really that calling is first to follow Christ himself, and second actually to shepherd our families first. So there's even some conflict over what calling really is and what our first callings are.
Yeah, most ministers I think would think to themselves, well, somebody's saying they need me, so I'm sorry, daughter, I can't go to your game. I better go tend to the church member.
Yes.
And what the church member may need may not be an emergency even. It might end up being that. But now you've shortchanged your kid, and you can't get that time back. You can't redo it.
Yep.
These are the hard decisions that pastors have to deal with all the time, and congregations feel like, well, we're paying you, right?
Yeah, and I think there's a spiritual level to this too. So anybody who has an important job of leadership has to make those kind of hard decisions between family and work, and a lot of the motivations of our own hearts play into that. So there's a spiritual element for the pastor themselves. Are they really keeping first things first, I'll put it that way, in their leadership role and what that means and how to spend time with their family and balance that. But then there's the added level of you're doing spiritual work, you're doing God's work, so it feels almost more important than maybe other jobs that we would say, maybe a leader of a company would have. This pressure of, but it's God's work. If I don't do it, who's going to do it?
Right.
And that's, I think a lot of people, really it starts to just seep into the fabric of our churches and our church leadership, that they're essential to what God's doing. And that's actually not true. God can do it. God can do it without us.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I hear you loud and clear. I served as a pastor for 23 years, and before that I was an associate minister, and before that I was a chaplain at 2 different colleges. I was in campus ministry and chaplaincy. So I've been in the business of serving people for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I've dealt with all those challenges, feeling like, you're God's person. He's put you there. You've got to do this because if God has called you, and you've got to just put everything aside and do this. And sometimes that means you don't go on vacation, and you don't get to do the things that other people do.
Right.
You do what other people want you to do. And put aside the things that you might want to do or the things that you might need to do for the sake of your own family and the people you love. And that's just a huge challenge and a burden, I think, for so many pastors to carry.
Yeah.
How do you walk them through that?
Well, and as you were saying that, I was thinking about, serving leaders has 4 core values, and it's really the core of what we think pastors need. The first one is just friendship. So we say our core value is we're mission focused, meaning we're not going to wait for pastors to come to us. We know they need us before they know they need us. I'll put it in those terms.
Yeah.
And what they really need is friendship. a safe place to have a relationship with somebody who could be there for them.
Yeah.
And so we want to pursue them before the point of burnout or some sort of moral failure or something that might happen in their ministry if they go too far down an unhealthy road. We like to say in Serving Leaders, some of the best stories we have are the ones that never got told, because we reached the pastor before the point of some sort of issue.
And how about congregations? I mean, all congregations are different. Some are more understanding than others may be. Some may be more understanding when they hear that their pastor needs time off or whatever. But then there may be some that are less forgiving, that they kind of have high expectations for a pastor. How do you reach the congregation to sensitize the congregation to the need that the person serving you is a human being and is God's child like you are? How do you do that?
Well, a couple ways. One way, and we really think it's important for the pastor themselves to begin to lead their congregation towards an understanding of what it means to follow Christ, to live out of grace, and for Him to lead them as one who is a sheep being their shepherd, right? And so in some sense, that pastor needs to lead the congregation themselves. And we do a lot of coaching in terms of where to go, how to do that, how to begin to cultivate a culture in your church of healthy rhythms of life and following Christ and what calling really means for even them as a pastor as they lead their congregation. But we also come in and do trainings. So we're happy to come into a church. Dave, our founder, who was on the video you just played, he has one that's one seminar called 20 Ways to Kill Your Pastor that he'll come in and do for our church just to encourage them and what it means for them to support their pastor.
Yeah, that's great. I've actually been to one of your dinners, and it was fascinating. And I've met Dave, and just a wonderful Christian human being. So I'm just grateful for the work that you do. I have so much regard for the wonderful work that you do. So tell me, what about money? So do any of the pastors come to you and say, you know what, I'm working my tail off here, and I'm not getting paid, and how do I make them aware that I could use more money, or how do you deal with that issue?
Yeah, so there's a number of pressure points. Money is certainly one of them. I think in our culture today, ministry leaders, pastors are both still the most respected people. Sometimes they can be turned into celebrities very easily within a congregation. And at the same time, we devalue the role vocationally in our culture. And we also have a mindset that pastors are called to sacrifice. Like, in other words, the calling of pastor equals call to give away your life, which in some sense is true. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have enough to provide for their family. Or actually, what I would say is actually live in a comparable way to the people they serve in order to then serve that community and that congregation well. So yeah, there's all kinds of pressure points. Some of the work we do is we do some consulting work with churches, whether it has to do with just issues like you bring up, maybe issues of pay, issues of caring for the pastor, or sometimes there's a lot of conflict that arises in churches. We do a lot of mediation work.
So and this is, I know we don't have a lot of time, but what about, when we have a catastrophic situation, a pastor comes to you and he or she has a big problem, maybe it's a drug or it's a substance abuse problem or something like that. How do you work with them?
So early on when Dave started the ministry, it was just him, solo starting Serving Leaders, but he had a counseling degree, and he knew he just needed to be able to have as many resources as possible to help with even extreme circumstances like that. But over time, he's been able to build a team, and in really recent years, we've been able to build a very large counseling team. We have a lot of great resources for all those kinds of needs, including some extreme needs. And we've walked a lot of pastors through some extreme places of burnout, places of moral failure or hidden sin that has come to light and has jeopardized their ministry. And one of our mission words is restore. So we exist to revive, restore, and resource ministry leaders. We want to see that restoration really happen. Because there are great stories of pastors who have had to step out of ministry for a while. Like we said, they're human, they're going to struggle. But to see them restored to that ministry is really exciting.
When we come back, I want to zero in on the state of church leaders from the standpoint of their emotional balance and well-being. Stay with us.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
We're talking to Joe Bruni of Serving Leaders Ministries. And in a way, they shepherd the shepherds, looking out for more than their career advancement or financial bottom line, but to the parts of life that are often hidden from view. Consider this from a recent Barna survey of church leaders. 1 in 5 are frequently lonely and exhausted. 68% of leaders are overwhelmed in the last 4 weeks. 21% frequently, 47% sometimes. Those are big numbers.
Yeah.
Those are big numbers. I mean, a lot of people who are burned out, having a tough time, feel lonely, exhausted.
Yes.
So how do you help somebody, how do you help the leader to overcome that? And then how do you, again, sensitize the church to the fact that, maybe you're working this poor person to death, and this person's never going to say no if you ask him. So we've got to set up some kind of basis for this person to get some rest, well-deserved rest.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, interestingly enough, I think we often see two issues. One you bring up, which is the pressure of ministry that a lot of pastors feel, where they feel pressured to be everything to everyone. Everything from the best preacher to the janitorial staff of a church. Right. And so there's a lot of pressure that comes on pastors that we deal with and kind of work through some of the emotional realities of that. There's also then the pressure of ministry itself and pastors put on themselves. So then the other side we see is pastors coming in and having put a lot of pressure on themselves to have a certain measure of success in ministry, a certain measure of they want to see their church grow. They want to see their ministry be something beyond what it is, and they don't know how to get there. A lot of what we do is to help them, remind them that the strategies of either running a church well so you can help everybody feel appeased, or of being a successful pastor, those are important to consider. But actually, if you're not dealing with your heart issues, of maybe even the idols of your own heart or the cultural idols of your church, then none of those things are going to actually ever be successful.
Well said, Joe, because the big challenge that many pastors have is that living in the world and then being the person that Christ put there to shepherd that flock. And the world says success looks like more money, bigger numbers.
Yep.
And I don't see anything in the Bible where Jesus says that's success. Where Jesus quantifies success by how many folks you have, or how much money you're bringing in, or by how big your building is, or by how many folks you think you're reaching. He doesn't. There's nothing in the Bible that quantifies it that way. It's who came to Christ because of you, right? Whose life was changed because of you, and Jesus is just as concerned with one person coming to Christ as he is with a bunch of people coming to Christ. So everybody matters, including if you're at a small church where there are 20 members, and people are coming to Christ and their lives are being changed, as if you're at a big church, a mega church with thousands of members.
Yeah.
That's.
And Jesus was constantly redefining success for people, right? Everybody had certain expectations of Jesus, and he continued to redefine it for them. Even John the Baptist sent his disciples and said, "Wait, we're confused. Are you the one?" And he said, "Hey, the deaf hear, the blind see." So he responded with, "I know you had certain expectations of what this would look like, but actually the Scripture is being fulfilled." I think that's an important aspect of what it means to lead. Actually, is to in yourself work through some of your own issues of what your expectations are, what pressures you're putting on yourself, what kind of potential idols of the heart that you're wrestling with, where your desires are leading in terms of how they might be affecting your ministry. But then also be able to help the church set expectations on what it means to follow Christ in that ministry, and not necessarily to set the pastor up or the ministry leader up as the hero of the story.
Right, that's so well said. It's human nature wants to stand up and take a bow, wants to hear applause, wants to be seen as the good guy or the good girl, and that's not at all what it's about. Joe, you are just so right on target here with all of this, and this is so wonderfully helpful. I know there are people listening, pastors listening probably, who can't wait to call you. How do they reach you is there a phone number to call?
Actually, the best way to reach us is servingleaders.org. We have a website that has a lot of the information about all the services we offer. It shows our team of counselors, and they can go right on there, and there's direct numbers to us and ways to inquire about.
And congregations can do the same. People can go because if they want to help their pastor, they can.
And actually, I'll mention that we also decided to start a wing of serving leaders that we just call SL Counseling. Yeah. Because what we realize is one of the ways we resource pastors and ministry leaders is, we offer them counseling, but they would also then refer their people to us and say, do you counsel non-ministry people? Right. Because the counseling load for pastors can be too much. Right. It's a lot. And so we realized we should utilize and leverage all the great counselors we have for the sake of the church and open up a counseling center as well. Amen. So pastors can refer their people to us as well.
Amen. So, thanks so much, Joe. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
So now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
I was taking a lot of notes today. Great program. A question I think for you, Joe, is who was the person in your church over all those years of ministry, or people, or what kind of person was the most encouraging to you? And I ask that because I know many of our viewers want to know, they see their pastor suffering, but they don't know exactly how to encourage them.
It was the person that would, and there were several of them that would just, without any fanfare, just offer help or offer an encouraging word or do something kind without any kind of a prompt to do it because it was in their heart to do it because they genuinely cared. And that was wonderful.
They just showed up.
Yeah, they just showed up. They just did something. They were the one that put forward the effort, that reached out to me, that called or that came forward and said something kind. And that's the beauty of all this. You never know when you're preaching. Everybody's a hearer of the word, but you don't know who's going to become a doer of the word. Right. And it's just wonderful and refreshing when people are kind.
Well, I think this was a very helpful, I hope it was, program today.
Oh yeah, I hope so. I hope that people are blessed by it. Well, the Bible instructs us to pray for those in authority over us. Presidents, pastors, parents, it's a long list. But what I hope you've learned from today's program is the truth that leaders need the tender, gentle encouragement of someone who can help them see clearly, someone who can help them just take the next step. Our prayer here at State of Independence is that you would see others around you as Christ sees us, with tenderness and compassion and love. I hope today's focus on leaders helps you do just that. Please send me your comments or questions in the comment box at joewatkins.org. I see them and I'll respond. From America's first capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. Thanks for watching. I love the work that they do. This is so close to my heart.
We have a lot of discarded pastors that are doing other things and probably should still be back in the ministry. And they're the rescuers.
Yeah.
Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.